Hello, Nick Laird-Clowes, as they say on the internet. Thanks for taking time to talk with us. Now, you have that funny English thing where it doesn't sound like it should, phonetics. The English language is...
That's right.
So it's Clowes, of course, as we've always called you Clowes.
Fantastic. It's Clowes because it's from a river in the north of England near Macclesfield, near Manchester, which is called the River Clew. C-L-O-W. And so people who lived there were called Clowes. They were valley dwellers, and that's me.
And you are the Laird of the Clowes.
Well, that came through a Scottish maternal grandmother, and my great-grandfather wanted to write books, but he didn't want to sound like his own father who wrote books. So he took his maternal grandmother's name and stuck it on the front of the Clowes, and then he wrote Diary of an English Hashish Eater. You probably can't say that.
Well, you can, but you can't smoke it, that's all.
Right, that's right.
Look, we're here to talk about your fabulous new box set. The last time we spoke, Zoot had done a cover of Life in a Northern Town. I think that's when we last spoke. Do you remember that?
Oh.
No, you don't. You don't.
Yes, I do. Of course I do. Yeah, no, completely. There have been, there's the Australian pub version, which is mind-blowingly good.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You don't know that. That is an incredible version.
Oh.
People keep still writing to me about, have you heard the Australian pub version? I said, heard it. I advised them on how you actually sang, "Ah-hey-oh, ma-ma-ma, oobie-doo-doo-naya." I said, it's got to be oobie-doo-doo-naya, because it can't be ooby-dooby or ooh into the night, oh, as has been sung on American versions.
That's right. You can't say ooby dooby because the Creedence covered that song.
That's right.
And it's probably copyright.
It's ooba-dooba-naya.
I'm familiar with the country, I can't remember the name,
Yes, Sugarland and Little Big Town.
That's a fantastic version. It's fabulous. And the video is fantastic because they do it at that award ceremony.
Yeah, she wrote to me to say, Jennifer Flowers, I think she's called, she said, your song made a young girl in a southern town very happy when I was a child or something. And I wrote back and said, I think it's brilliant. And she said, but you do understand that we'll never put it on a record because we're just coming off a number one of our own. And I said, wow, okay, well, I said, whatever, but it's wonderful you've done it. And then they put it on a fan-only version of their album due to fan demand. And it went into the American Top 40 off this album that was only not the real issue of the album, and it got a Grammy nomination.
Nick, I want to ask you a personal question.
Please.
How many versions of Life in a Northern Town are there out there?
There's about 150 the last count, but I may have just stopped counting after 10 and added 10 times the amount. But what is very, very odd after 40 years, whatever it's been, at least once every 2 months I get a request for using the chorus on yet another song, and it goes on and on and on. Now I listen to them and I see, is this really adding anything? Or are you just taking it and sticking it on your song because you haven't got a chorus? So some of them I actually turn down. And
oh, really? You turned down some? Oh.
Some I do. It is a miracle. You know, it came from a very dark place, from a very depressed point in my life, and it came out of that depressed place, life in a dark northern town, and it changed my life forever. And the other two guys in the band.
Yes, and Nick, I've got to tell you a little truth. We wouldn't be speaking to you without that song.
I know it.
Yeah.
I know it. I wouldn't be sitting in the flat I'm sitting in London. I wouldn't have the car.
You'd be homeless, wouldn't you, Nick? You'd be homeless, you poor fella.
Of course, like I was before.
Nick, there's more than just Life on a Northern Town on this new box set of yours. In fact, I think there's 76 more.
Well, there's 7 albums.
Yes.
And we only put out 3 official ones. But when Cherry Red came to me, they'd licensed catalogue from Warner Brothers in America, and they said, we'd like to put out something called the complete recordings. So that's great. I know those things in the archives, and I remembered vaguely things that most things had come out, but there were all the B-sides and Japanese singles for beer ads and strange things that we'd done along the way, and dived into the Warner Brothers archives and found the things. It took an enormous amount of time, Nick. It took me a year. It was really intense work. I had no idea. When they sent me what they were planning to do, said, oh, no, this is terrible. And when they sent me the artwork, no, you missed we have a very, very strong sense of what we want to sound and look like, and this is not it. And I looked down the email trail, and I saw, yes, you can license it from Warner Brothers in America, but only if Nick agrees to the things. It was like, after that, I said, you have to let me do it the way I want to do it. And they said, yeah, we'd love to. It was great. They said, yeah, we'd love the artist to be involved. Please do. But I didn't know it was going to be so much work.
Now, Nick, the last time we spoke about some of your music was when you released your Morning Lasted All Day compilation. Can you believe it's 10 years ago now?
Yeah, I know, because I had to look it up for my new liner notes. Can't believe it.
You probably don't remember, but I had a complaint. It was on the internet, and I noticed a few people, and I sort of agreed with them, but you answered the question very well. But the criticism was that you did this double CD, and both, I think, CDs went for 45 minutes, and people were complaining, well, you've got 80 minutes, 70 minutes, even 60 minutes on those two CDs, but now, with this new box set, you've gone the other way. 3 albums, but 7 discs.
I know, it was amazing. It just went on and on, because they said, okay, 6, then finally, and then they said, no, well, I mean, if you really want every version of the last single that I think the band put out, or the penultimate single, was a cover of John Lennon's Love. And at the time, Warner Brothers in America were very keen to that all these different people could mix it. Jelly Bean Benitez, all these people they were using with Prince and Madonna, and I didn't want to let control, as usual. I didn't want to let go of that. But once they started bringing them in, they were like, my God, this is great. You went to the Dance Factory and Danceteria and heard the people playing it in front of. So I said, if you want 7 versions of that, I'm going to put that on one album, and we're going to put all the other different things. And they said, great.
Nick, I've got to ask you, it's called Religion, Revolution and Railways, which are the 3 R's.
Yeah,
they're
the real 3 R's.
Yes, they're the genuine 3 R's, because reading, writing and arithmetic, there's only one word that starts with R. That's fake 3 R's there, but you're the real thing.
Right.
So explain the title for us, Nick. Can you explain it for us?
Yep, looking for a title. They wanted to call it The Dream Academy, The Complete Recordings. It's like, oh, no, I don't like that. And we've had a retrospective. We had once on the 2014 compilation. Of course, I listed all the tracks and all the things. I thought maybe The Edge of Forever was a good title. There was once a best-of in Japan that was called Somewhere in the Sun, a line from one of the songs. And I thought that was so beautiful, but I didn't want to confuse it with that. And the last album by the Dream Academy was called A Different Kind of Weather, but I had called it Religion, Revolution and Railways because it had a song called Waterloo on it. It was the time of the wall coming down in Berlin, Nelson Mandela being released, and so Religion, Revolution and Railways was what it was going to be called, and Warner's, to their finest moment, quashed it and said, no, you're not calling it that.
What was their excuse, Nick?
Didn't say. I think they didn't like the word religion being used, or maybe they didn't like revolution. I suspect it was religion. Anyway, they didn't like it, and A Different Kind of Weather. It was 1989, 1990, and so just the cusp. And I remember saying to my mother, who was still alive then, Mum, the weather's very different, isn't it? She was the only one. Most people go, no, it's always different. She said, yes, it's changed. It's changing. And so there was a song on there called Forest Fire that was all about the hole in the ozone and the world under threat, the planet under threat. So A Different Kind of Weather, it suddenly occurred to me that that was a sort of metaphor for the music. And so that was the 3rd album. So I thought Religion, Revolution and Railways is perfect. It says everything about the box set and everything that the band stood for. When I say religion, it's like looking for the answer more than one particular sort of spiritual search.
Nick, what you've done is CD 1 is the first album, The Dream Academy, then CD 2, Remembrance Days, and then A Different Kind of Weather. So they're your 3 studio albums on one CD only. Nick, tell us a little bit about how did the first one come together? The Dream Academy, self-titled. Was it a thing with tracks recorded here and there, or were they all together and it was all very neat?
No. We had been making demos for a few different record companies, and we'd been turned down by every record company. And then a guy that managed the Beat, the English Beat.
The Beat, was it, Nick?
Yeah, the Beat. Stephen Tintin Duffy and various other people. I'd known him for quite a long time, and I played him some of the songs, and he heard Life in a Northern Town. And to his his credit, it wasn't even called Life in the Northern Town. He said, I'll put up the money for you to do a demo of that. We made a demo of that, and then we kept making other demos and things, and finally Jeff Travis from Rough Trade, who was one of the companies that turned us down, a little indie company as well, turned us down. He called me out of the blue and said, can I take your music to America? I'm going to play the Smiths and all these new bands I've got, see if I can get a deal for them. Do you mind if I take your music along? I said, not at all. We had absolutely nothing, and we were pretty low. So Warner's in America, he came back and he said, unbelievable. He called us into his office, and then he said, both Warner Brothers and Sony, Michael Jackson's label, they both loved it. You're in a bidding war. So what happened was we wanted to sign to Warner Brothers because Lenny Waronker was president, and he produced Randy Newman songs and albums and was a great producer. And they had Prince, and they had all these people, R.E.M. and Neil Young and everyone. Anyway, so we signed to them, and we started in the studio with Gary Langham because he was very hip. He was Trevor Horn's engineer, and he was starting as a producer, and we did 2 tracks with him. And the record company came and they heard them, and they said, wow, great, but, how did you do that Life in the Northern Town? I said, well, we did a demo of it, and then I played it to David Gilmour, who was a friend of mine because his brother had been in my previous band, and he had said, oh, I think the drums could be better, and, I think why don't you cut this bit here? So we made some changes, and they said, well, great, why don't you carry on? We'd really like you to do the album now like you did Life in the Northern Town. So I went back to David Gilmour, and he said, I'm not sitting in a studio with you guys for 6 months, but if you want to, do it the way you did with Northern Town, and you go in and produce it yourself, and when you've finished, bring it to me, and at the end, I'll just make some comments, and then we can carry on with that. So he said, fantastic, and Warner's agreed. So I went in with the guy I'd originally gone in, who we made the demo with, George Nicholson, and he and I worked and produced the tracks together, and I took them to David, and right in the middle of that, Life in the Northern Town came out while we were recording, and was a hit. So suddenly, actually, we spent about 3 months with David at the end in his studio because it was really fun, and he was thrilled, and we were thrilled.
So that's CD 1 of the box set. CD 2 is Remembrance Days, and
Yes.
the Dream Academy self-titled album is a big hit, maybe unexpectedly bigger than Warner's and you guys thought. The hard thing is to follow up something like that. So tell us a little bit about Remembrance Days, CD 2.
Okay, so what had happened was Life in the Northern Town came out in England in the winter, and then it spread out. It was a hit in England, but nobody pushed it. It went to number 15. They didn't take out any ads. We were an American signing. They weren't keen on us. And then it spread out all over Europe. So suddenly we were going on these TV shows. We were traveling all the time, and then we were coming back and finishing the album. Warner's in America said, no, we're not going to do it like just sticking a single out. We want a whole campaign for this, and we have to have the album ready. We want the videos ready and do all these things, because MTV was going to be the driving force for getting us on, sort of new format. And we loved film and music, so we were keen on that. So we'd done that. They'd managed to get a single, was the highest played record in America. The album went top 20. We did Saturday Night Live. And then the next year, so now a year later, they wanted to send us to the Far East and playing in Japan and doing all these things, Philippines and Taiwan. By the time we get back, it's like March 1986. Well, now, next album. So we knuckled down and started writing, and David Gilmour would have been the choice to be the producer, but he was working on his first Pink Floyd album without Roger Waters, so he couldn't do it.
Nick, was that a momentary lapse of reason for David?
On his part, you're right. And it was, in fact, that very album. And then, in between all of this, because the first album had been a hit in America, you suddenly get these offers to do film music, which we were all interested in. And we'd done a song called Heaven, which appears on the new box set, Heaven Part 1 and 2, and that was for Diane Keaton's first film that she directed. So the person that mixed that and worked on that was Roy Halley, and he had produced Bridge Over Troubled Water. He was my choice. We got to use Roy. We used him on Heaven. He's a master of echoes and reverb. Meanwhile, Kate St. John in the band had met Hugh Padgham, who was very big at the time because he did all the Genesis and Phil Collins, and he had produced Bowie and McCartney and everyone, and he said, let's go and meet in a cocktail bar, and we met with Hugh Cornwell from the Stranglers, because Hugh Cornwell wanted him to produce the Stranglers, I think going out with his sister. Anyway, so me, Kate, Hugh Cornwell, and Hugh Padgham, and then Padgham said, I'd really like to produce the album. So when I told Warner's in America that, they said, we really want you to use him because he's an amazing guy. We haven't got any of his records. So that's how it started. Then the second album, we set up in a studio in Fulham, down an alleyway, an old converted garage, a really sort of quite a cheap studio that we could just hunker down in. And it was run by a guy who hadn't yet gone to Hollywood, and his name was Hans Zimmer. And he had this little studio, and we rented it for a very good price because the first album we'd made with a lot of drum machines and things to supplement the three of us because we don't have a drummer and bass player. Hugh Padgham had suggested, because he worked so closely with Peter Gabriel, that we used Jerry Marotta on drums and Larry Fast to find extra incredible sounds on keyboards.
Nick, you didn't need hands? I'm sorry.
Hands that do dishes. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've just gone a bit stupid.
An extra pair of hands, you mean?
Yeah.
No, Hans was, I'll leave the poems to you. He was, he did play on the album. He did things like, he had a wall of an ancient Moog synthesizer, and we said, we want waves on the sound of Indian Summer, the first track on the album, and our first single on the second album. And he said, I can make those with this huge machine. It took hours. And then on another one, on Power to Believe, I said, we just need something at the beginning. And he said, I will show you how the new equipment works. And he banged a fire extinguisher, like, ding, and then he down-tuned it. And that's on the beginning of Power to Believe. So it was a fascinating experience.
This is the 80s, where I suppose if you didn't get radio support, because I can't understand why Indian Summer wasn't a hit, because it's one of my favourite Dream Academy songs.
When we play it now live, we went to Japan and played it. Yeah, it's got power. We took that to America, and Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac heard it and said, I'd like to work on this, because I stopped working with Hugh Padgham towards the end of it, went to America and mixed it and finished it myself, and did a couple of tracks with Lindsey Buckingham.
Well, that's CD2. Nick, we've only got 5 left.
CD3 was a tougher one because...
That was quite a few years later too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it took time. Because after the second one, as you say, Indian Summer hadn't been as big a hit as Life in the Northern Downs, you were already up and running by then. They used to say, one hit buys you 10 years in the business. What's odd is that the first album came out, the second one came out. No, Indian Summer wasn't as big a hit as We'd Have Liked, and it wasn't. But Power to Believe, one of the tunes on the record, John Hughes, who'd put 2 of our songs in Ferris Bueller's Day Off from the first album, called me and said, here you're in Los Angeles mixing the record, will you bring me some music? Because I'm making this film called Trains, Planes and Automobiles with Steve Martin and John Candy. So I went and played him the music, and he was looking at the film through a little viewfinder back of a 20th century Vox lot, and he was in this little place, and he said, put the music on. I put the music on. No. Third one in. Wow, what's this? Hold on, just get me the end of the film. The man put the end of the film, ran it through his little machine. Now get the bit where they're going home at Thanksgiving. Wow, okay. And then he turned and he said, thank you, you've saved my life. Again, he said. He may have been blowing smoke up.
No, he wasn't, Nick. He wasn't. Trust me, he wasn't.
It was so sweet. And that, now, if you watch Trains, Planes and Automobiles, Religion, Revolution and Railways, Trains, Planes and Automobiles, if you watch it, Power to Believe, this is like throughout the whole film. Couldn't believe it. Later, I realized, hold on, this is film score. Anyway, fantastic. So that was that. So all I'm saying is things started to take over our lives, and the second album, by then you're coming off this thing, you get lots of offers for things that would be interesting that come your way, that take your time. So the third one, we regrouped and we started with Anthony Moore, who'd been working with David Gilmour, who'd been an old friend of mine, and he'd been writing lyrics with David on Momentary Lapse of Reason. And we went in with him to the studio and settled down, really making the work. And every time David came off his Momentary Lapse of Reason tour, he would say, I'll just pop in and see you guys in the studio, because he and I were friends, and he and Anthony Moore were friends. So he'd come in, and then we'd sort of say, do you feel like playing guitar on that? And he'd say, yeah, I think, just get me the sound. Okay, yeah, right. So he got involved, and finally he said, look, I'm just going to Australia and finishing the end of the tour. If you guys could wait a couple of months, you could write some more things, and by the time I get back, you'd go into the studio together and do it like we did on the first album and finish it together. So we said, wonderful. And so that's what we did, so it took a little longer, and that was the third album. We toured and then we split up.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, why wasn't there a fourth album? Because there never has been a fourth album. Do you guys stay in touch, Gabriel and Kate?
We're friends. What's incredible is it changed our lives, this whole experience. We were very, very tight with the people at the record company and Warner in America, and they were a legendary company, and they really, really treated us with such wonderful life, and I still see them too. When they come to England, they always call up, and we always go out and meet, and Kate and Gilbert and I are friends because it's impossible not to. It changed our lives, and it's still changing our lives. But what happened there was we get to the end, and at the end of the album, I'd been in there just with David and Anthony Moore mixing now for months, and Kate. And Gilbert had been not in the studio, and he had met Polly Styrene from X-Ray Specs, and we finished the record, and he said, can I play you something I'm working on? And I said, sure. I went to his flat in a small room. We've been in these big studios. In those days, that's what you did. But he had all this little bits of new equipment in his little front room, and they were all set up in there, and he played me this version of John Lennon's Love, which I loved. They'd only got the beginnings of it, and I started singing it, and Polly Styrene started singing the names of the Hare Krishna Raja. She started chanting. I said, my God, this is so psychedelic. This is fantastic. And we cut it in about 2 days and went and mixed it ourselves, just me and Gilbert at the end. And when the record company heard it, they said, that's the first single. And so that was thrilling. And we'd gone to India for the video, believe it or not, to Rishikesh, the director's idea. He was Indian. And we'd gone to where the Beatles had studied with Maharishi, and we went with Polly Styrene and the band. And when we came back, we went on tour, and it was the snowiest, coldest winter. The war had just started with Iraq, and suddenly our version of Love was banned along with every other war reference. So Massive Attack couldn't be called Massive Attack. They could only be called Massive. You weren't allowed to have pro-peace things. And we did the tour, and it was a joyful tour. It was the first tour we'd done since the beginning of starting the band. When we got to the end, Gilbert said, you know, I now want to do what you do, which is I want to have to say everything had been working like it had filtered through me. I knew what we wanted and what our sound should be, and I interacted with the record company. He said, now I want to do that. I said, okay. So Kate said, okay, so it'll just be the two of us. So the record company said, fine. And about a month later, Kate called and said, Van Morrison loved our version of Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want. I said, yeah. She said, Nick, he's asked me to join this band. Oh, no. No.
And then there was...
And then there was one, and then I called the record company, and they said, sure, we'll just go on your own, which was great. And then after about 6 weeks, they called and said, you know what, this is going to hurt us more than it's going to hurt you, but we think the band's over. And I said, yeah, that's right.
If only Agatha Christie was still around.
Exactly. I think that cryptic Religion, Revolution, and Railways title could have worked its way into an Agatha Christie novel.
All right, Nick, we better go.
Yeah, you know, I love talking to you. I mean, they tell them they should give you, for your old people, that's me, we need an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Senior discount. Well, all right, Nick, good luck with it. You don't need any luck. Plus, You've already sold out. I've sold out. I mean, sold out the box set. You didn't sell
I know
it.
what you mean.
Really, no, yeah. I mean. Anyway, it's an absolute pleasure, Nick. You are such a gentleman,
Wonderful.
and you can bear my silly puns too.
Oh, we're in the same world there. Hey, look, it must be something to do with the Knicks. But you know what? Lovely to talk to you. Really lovely.